A Fox News alert as the Obama administration has taken aim at Israel, and Israel is now firing back. Strained relations reaching a new low as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responding to a blistering attack condemning Israeli settlements. And the Prime Minister's words equally as harsh and really unprecedented. Brand new hour of America's Newsroom. Nice to be with you at home. I'm Leland Vittert.
And I'm Heather Childers. Bill and Martha are off. Blistering, harsh words, you can call it that as well, and hard feelings after Secretary of State John Kerry warns Israel is threatening the chances for peace by expanding settlements in East Jerusalem and the West Bank. Prime Minister Netanyahu slamming Kerry's speech.
Secretary Kerry said that the United States cannot vote against its own policy. But that's exactly what it did at the UN. And that's why Israel opposed last week's Security Council resolution, because it effectively calls the Western Wall occupied Palestinian territory, because it encourages boycotts and sanctions against Israel. That's what it effectively does. And because it reflects a radical shift in U.S. policy towards the Palestinians on final status issues, those issues that we always agreed, the U.S. and Israel, have to be negotiated directly, face-to-face, without preconditions.
Rich Edson live at the State Department this morning. Rich, so unusual, not only the back and forth in this kind of way, but also that Secretary Kerry comes out in the middle of Christmas week and delivers what is essentially a major policy address. Take us through the timing.
Well, and Leland, especially since there are only about 3 weeks to go in the Obama administration, and the incoming Trump administration will very likely have a much different foreign policy view than this one. For Secretary of State John Kerry, in his words, he says that he delivered this speech and the outgoing administration cannot, in good conscience, as he put it, do nothing and say nothing when we see the hope of peace slipping away. So he delivered this speech and mostly criticized Israel on its settlement building.
Some seem to believe that the U.S. friendship means the U.S. must accept any policy, regardless of our own interests, our own positions, our own words, our own principles, even after urging again and again that the policy must change. Friends need to tell each other the hard truths, and friendships require mutual respect.
Kerry did acknowledge that there is one of many impediments is the settlement issue to peace in the Middle East. He called out the Palestinians for failing to crack down more on terrorism and for glorifying terrorists by renaming streets after them, public squares after them. Yet the majority of this speech was criticism of Israel on the settlement issue. He also said that the government of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is the most right-wing in Israeli history, with an agenda driven by the most extreme elements. Shortly after this speech, the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas released a statement that says he is willing to resume peace discussions if Israel stops its settlement building, Leland.
Well, picking up on what John Kerry said, it was Benjamin Netanyahu a couple of days ago who said that friends don't take friends to the Security Council. This all started with that UN resolution that the U.S. didn't veto. Did Secretary Kerry talk about that, this accusation by the Israelis that they have evidence that the U.S. orchestrated the resolution?
Now, he did. This did all start about a week ago, and much of the speech yesterday was in defense of the U.S. action. The U.S. abstained from blocking that resolution. While it didn't vote for the resolution, abstaining allowed it to pass the UN Security Council. The Israelis have charged the U.S. did a lot more than that and actually orchestrated this vote. That's something Kerry denies.
The United States did not draft or originate this resolution, nor did we put it forward. It was drafted by Egypt. It was drafted in Egypt, which is one of Israel's closest friends in the region, in coordination with the Palestinians and others.
Israel, Secretary of State John Kerry also says that this, and framed this as something that's not new for U.S. policy. He says that previous administrations of both political parties have allowed resolutions that were critical of Israel to pass, including on settlements. But Israel views this as a parting shot from an administration that neither side really ever embraced, and that was on full view yesterday, Leland, both here in Washington and in Israel.
Well, certainly there, as the Israelis say, they have ironclad information to the contrary that they'll release later. Rich Edson, State Department, thanks so much, sir.
saying they'll release that to President-elect Donald Trump, who was also speaking out against the Obama administration for its stance on Israel, which some critics say is an attempt to hinder his transition into power.
What did you think of Secretary Kerry's speech today?
Speaks for itself. Everybody knows, Mr. Lauder. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. President, do you think they're trying to undermine you?
Peter Doocy live for us in Palm Beach, Florida. Peter, is the president-elect proposing any sort of quick fix at the UN, so to speak, once he's sworn in?
No, Heather, the president-elect is instead describing the United Nations as an institution that causes problems instead of solves problems, and he's suggesting that this 193-member body actually favors America's enemies over America's friends.
I'm very, very strong on Israel. I think Israel's been treated very, very unfairly by a lot of different people. You look at resolutions in the United Nations, you take a look at what's happened. They're up for 20 reprimands, and other nations that are horrible places that treat people horribly haven't even been reprimanded.
The president-elect says the United Nations is a waste of time and money unless it lives up to its potential, but he says it does have potential. Heather.
All right, so another big issue, Russia. What does the president-elect think about possible punishment for Russia for apparently interfering with the American election?
Heather, he certainly is not endorsing sanctions against Russia for their alleged involvement in election day hacking, and he's actually now still expressing skepticism that they had anything to do with any kind of digital interference on election day here in the United States. He said again last night when he popped out from a party for staff and friends at Mar-a-Lago that he just thinks it's hard to point a finger at one person or another when the crime committed happened in cyberspace.
I think we ought to get on with our lives. I think that computers have complicated lives very greatly. The whole age of computer has made it where nobody knows exactly what's going on. We have speed, we have a lot of other things, but I'm not sure you have the kind of security that you need. But I have not spoken with the senators, and I certainly will be over a period of time.
Mr. Trump also took a shot at Republican Senator Lindsey Graham last night. Graham, for the last few days, has been pitching personal sanctions against Putin, Russia's president. Mr. Trump says he doesn't know what Graham is doing, hasn't spoken to the South Carolina senator, but he reminded reporters that Graham did run against him. Heather?
Yeah, we spoke with him along with Senator John McCain right here on this program yesterday about that. A very patriotic Don King standing next to him there. Thank you so much for joining us, Peter.
Looked like a good party.
Yeah.
Thanks, Heather.
More on this. Mike Warren, online editor for the Weekly Standard. Mike, nice to see you. We won't ask you to comment on Don King's outfit. Speaks for itself, I guess.
Good.
Everyone is talking about how unprecedented this is, not only in the sense of the way the United States has, some would say, thrown Israel under the bus, others said let the bus just hit Israel and didn't get him out of the way. But it's also unprecedented in the sense that we've never really seen this kind of foreign policy gulf between an incoming and outgoing administration. Even Carter, Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Clinton, Bush, Bush, Obama. Did we ever see this kind of public dispute between the incoming president and the current president?
Not one this wide. I think there's always this this sense from the outgoing administration that there's only one president at a time, and this is something we're certainly hearing from the Obama administration. But the sort of last-minute, real sort of outlandish statements from John Kerry, the whole debacle at the UN last week, I think really suggests that the Obama administration sees their role in these final days is to really sort of plant their flag and say this is where we think U.S. policy needs to be in opposition to what they see as sort of a polar opposite in the incoming Trump administration. It really is unprecedented, and but it is quite clarifying as well to show you the differences, I think, between the Obama foreign policy and not just the incoming Trump administration, but sort of the more mainstream foreign policy, at least on Israel, in both parties.
Yeah, well, yeah, big differences. Also big differences in style. John Kerry, 73 minutes. Donald Trump, 240-character tweet saying this: "We cannot continue to let Israel be threatened with such total disdain and disrespect." They used to have a great friend in the U.S., but, ... not anymore. The beginning of the end was the horrible Iran deal, and now this, UN, Stay Strong Israel, January 20th, is fast approaching. Secretary Kerry then came back on MSNBC saying essentially, look, this doesn't help much, and not only that, disagree with either of us, but this really puts our allies in an uncomfortable spot when you have sort of this incredible disagreement, to your point, one president at a time.
Right, but the question then I would propose to Secretary Kerry is, why make this speech with just 20 some odd days left in the Obama administration? What is going to change in terms of U.S. policy that, in these last 20 days that's going to have a big effect? The one thing that all of this in this last week will do is, one, tie Donald Trump's hands in a lot of ways with respect to the international law coming down on Israel with this UN resolution. I think there's going to be a lot of legal consequences for Israel in international court if this does go forward. And Donald Trump doesn't really have a lot of recourse, at least in the United Nations Security Council, because Russia and China have veto power just like the United States if the United States does try to push for undoing this resolution. And then more broadly, the different messages coming from both Secretary Kerry and the incoming Trump administration is quite confusing, and it's a two-way street. I think Secretary Kerry and the Obama administration does have some agency here. They don't have to be doing these things, and yet they are.
Well, and as you point out, especially with this UN resolution, possible long-lasting consequences that the new administration can't roll back. Mike, you got to leave it there. Appreciate it, sir.
Thanks.
All the best. Happy New Year. Heather?
Well, Israel firing back at Secretary of State John Kerry for his speech criticizing the Israeli government. We will speak with a former Israeli ambassador to the UN.
Charities are seeking outside help with fundraising this busy holiday season. Time to donate, perhaps, but how much of your donation is going to pay for that outside help, for all those phone calls and telemarketers, instead of actually your money going to the charity itself? Important question.
And could a virtual assistant hold the key to solving a murder case? Some prosecutors seem to think so, and our legal panel will weigh in on the role Amazon Echo and similar technology could play in the courts.
Colonel Mustard did it in the living room with the candlestick. What they're looking for is maybe a snippet.
It's a massive powder day up in the high country in Colorado, and traffic is once again flowing on the major interstate, I-70. Snow shut down a number of lanes, and there were some big pileups, as you can see. Mangled mess in Silverthorne, just west of Denver, where you'd get off to go to either Keystone or Breckenridge. A lot of cars damaged on I-70. Investigators say 25 cars were involved in those crashes, and it took crews 3 hours to clean it all up. Thankfully, no serious injuries, though.
In the end, we did not agree with every word in this resolution. There are important issues that are not sufficiently addressed or even addressed at all. But we could not in good conscience veto a resolution that condemns violence and incitement and reiterates what has been for a long time the overwhelming consensus and international view on settlements.
Secretary of State John Kerry defending the decision to allow a UN resolution condemning Israeli settlements in territory claimed by the Palestinians. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu later blasting the speech, calling it biased against Israel. Dan Gillerman is a former Israeli ambassador to the UN and a Fox News contributor, and he joins us now with some more insight in his opinion. Thank you very much for joining us today.
It's good to be with you, Heather.
So hopefully you heard the sound that we pulled there from Secretary of State John Kerry. He said that in good conscience, the United States could not veto this resolution. Do you think that they should have?
Oh, definitely. They should have. They've vetoed similar resolutions before. And why they did this and did not veto this resolution belongs, I believe, to the psychology department rather than the diplomatic arena. It is a very, very real betrayal of an ally, of their only and the most loyal ally in the region and maybe in the world. But, you know, in a way, we shouldn't be surprised, because this administration and this president have really let down their allies time and time again. They've let down the people of Iran and signed a horrible deal with Ayatollahs. They've drawn red lines in Syria and let Assad butcher 500,000 of his own people. They've thrown President Mubarak of Egypt under the bus and supported the Muslim Brotherhood. They've led from behind in Libya. They've actually created a situation where the allies feel they cannot, and the enemies feel they can get away with murder. It's just a pity that at the very last minute, during Christmas and the holiday time, they decided to add Israel to this very sorry list of achievements.
Yeah, President Obama's criticism of Israeli settlements going back to 2009 in the speech that he gave in Cairo. In reference to settlements and the amount of time that was spent on that in this 70-minute speech that Secretary Kerry gave, he mentioned settlements, I think, 42 times. He referred to Hezbollah as a militant group. Hamas, he talked about them at 4 times. The focus on settlements, what did you think about that?
Well, first of all, I think you did a great job by pointing out the number of times that Secretary Kerry touched upon issues which should worry the world today. There was hardly any mention of terror. As you said, there was a very little mention of Iran, which is probably the most dangerous country in the world today. And this obsessive concentration on settlements, which, are really not the problem. I mean, with everything that is, with hundreds of thousands of people being butchered in Syria, with people being homeless, with terror, with Iran terrorizing the world, this is what matters. I think even the United States and even Secretary Kerry realized that settlements are not the problem. The problem is the settlement. Once there'll be a settlement, the settlements will not be a problem. Israel has proven it time and time again. When we made peace with Egypt and gave back every inch, including settlements, when we made peace with Jordan, when we evacuated unilaterally Gaza and gave it back to the Palestinians, who turned it into a launching pad for missiles and a terror base. Time and time again, when we gave up settlements, we were rewarded by war and by rockets. But at the end of the day, if we have a Palestinian partner who is viable and who is willing to be pragmatic, we will also give up settlements. But settlements are not the problem. And concentrating on them, making them the focal point of your farewell speech, to me, is pathetic.
So on that point, though, saying that Israel would be willing to give up some settlements, what if East Jerusalem and the West Bank had been left out of this resolution?
Well, I think still this would have been a bad resolution, because the conflict cannot be settled. And actually, President Obama is the one who said it at the UN. Neither by UN resolutions nor by foreign powers, only by the parties themselves. And by prejudging the settlement and by having this resolution, they are actually halting and, in a way, damaging the peace process and preventing the two sides from reaching an agreement. I think this is not only, this is damaging, this is counterproductive, and at the same time, it was a real betrayal of Israel. Doing this on the eve of the Sabbath and then having that speech by Secretary Kerry during Christmas time, both the Secretary and the President are leaving this world in a much more dangerous place than they found it.
Yeah, many people
Everywhere
agree
you
with
look around, terror is reigning. And at the end of the day, to make settlements the focal point of your legacy makes it a very poor legacy, and I'm really sorry that happened.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us. We are out of time. As I said, a lot of people agree with you. We'll see what this means for the administration moving forward, that being the Trump administration. Thank you.
Crunch time for the transition. The White House ramming through some last-minute measures that could jam up President-elect Trump's plans for his new administration.
A sinkhole and a gas leak forcing dozens of people from their homes. A delivery man calling the fire department when he spotted this. This giant hole in the middle of the street. This was in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Firefighters detecting a strong odor of gas, evacuating about 20 homes. That's a 4-block area that's closed to traffic. Several residents sheltering at a nearby school. Utility crews eventually shutting off the gas and making repairs.
Even before President Trump's inauguration, the new Congress will get to work. Next week, Republican lawmakers are looking to pass 3 key bills. The man of the hour, Doug McKelway, live from Washington. So what's first out of the gate, Doug?
Well, first piece of legislation coming down the pike, Leland, that we expect to see is going to be the REINS Act. That is short for Regulations from the Executive in Need of Scrutiny. In other words, the Republican Congress wants to yank the reins on the wave of regulations and executive actions that Obama has been passing. According to its chief sponsor, Representative Doug Collins of Georgia, Congress is partly to blame. In a statement, he said, "We've ceded our legislative responsibility to agencies that were never intended to make laws, and the result has been redundant, counterproductive rules that have massive impacts on our economy." Speaker Paul Ryan, in his recent 60 Minutes interview, indicated that these regulations are slowing the economy.
We really want to focus on economic growth and growing the economy. There are a lot of regulations that are really just crushing jobs. Look at the coal miners in the Rust Belt that are getting out of work. Look at the loggers and the timber workers in the paper mills in the West Coast. Look at the ranchers or farmers in the Midwest with the regulations.
In addition, published reports indicate Congress is also set to unleash the Midnight Rules Act, which would allow Congress to block the flurry of 11th-hour rules that the administration is unleashing in its waning weeks. Also said to be up for immediate congressional action, a resolution disapproving of the UN Security Council's recent vote to condemn Israel for its settlements, a vote which the administration abstained from. It was a break from long-held U.S. foreign policy. Leland, back to you.
So how do the Democrats play into this? Obviously, President Obama still has veto power over anything that Congress passes, and the Democrats may be in the minority, but they can still make a lot of waves in the Senate.
That's right. Well, it's in the new Congress. It's going to be absolute warfare, but it always is. And one sign of what we can expect, Democrats have already announced that they'll be holding a day of action in cities across America on January 15th, before the inauguration, to attack the new Republican health care agenda. They're going to make the case that the GOP is going to try to dismantle health care from what they claim are 30 million Americans, that they will end guaranteed Medicare benefits for millions of older Americans by converting Medicare into a voucher program, that they're going to try to slash Medicaid and threaten nursing home care for more than 4 million vulnerable seniors. Now, Republicans obviously dismiss this as wild scare tactics that bear no resemblance to what their agenda really is, but it's all an indication of the battles we will see in another couple of weeks.
Bloody battles they will be. Doug McKelway in Washington. Thanks, Doug.
It's a pleasure.
Well, new developments in a Russian military plane crash, what investigators are now ruling out in the deaths of all 92 people on board.
And get this, technology, the stuff you have in your house, maybe got for Christmas, could play a role in a murder investigation as prosecutors try to get a hold of the defendant's virtual assistant known as an Amazon Echo. So, can the device be used as evidence? What could it tell us? Our legal panel coming up next. Fox News alert as Russian investigators haven't found any evidence of an explosion causing a Russian military plane to crash, but they say they are not ruling out foul play. The plane's flight data recorders, the black boxes, show no sign of an explosion before the plane crashed after takeoff into the Black Sea. But a cockpit conversation reveals the captain saying there was a, quote, special situation unfolding. No word yet on what he was referring to. All 92 people on board were killed in that crash.
Prosecutors in Arkansas hoping to obtain a warrant for Amazon Echo data that they hope can help in a murder case against James Bates, accused of murdering a coworker at his home last year. Amazon has so far refused to give the data up. And joining me now is former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney Sam Zanganeh and defense attorney Whitney Bone. Thank you both for joining us.
Good morning.
So, Whitney, I'll start with you. Explain to people, what exactly is this Amazon Echo?
Well, what it is it's a cylindrical device, basically, that responds to your voice and performs certain functions within your home, operates certain equipment, appliances, based upon recognition of your voice.